of Indigenous Women on Biodiversity in Latin America. And I will join you moderating this phase regarding the strengthening of capacities and knowledge of women and young Indigenous women on the path towards COP16. An activity is supported by FIIB and Landeslife. This seminar denominated Indigenous people and the recognition of its rights under the framework of biodiversity. It is a series of 5 online seminars that we will conduct, and I hope that you'll be able to join us. The objective of this is to establish, incentivize, and strengthen the design and competence of the Indigenous peoples, especially for the youth and young females in Latin America and the Caribbean, so that they can contribute and insight in the decisions of the COP16 on the biodiversity agreement and also the revision of national strategies on biodiversity and action plan of the global framework for biodiversity Kunming-Montreal nationally. And sharing with this the respect of rights, the efforts of Indigenous peoples, and the conservation of biodiversity. We inform you that we have simultaneous interpreting available to Spanish and to English. And we will also like to ask you to keep your mics closed or off. Today is the International Day for Indigenous Peoples, an event or an occasion to reaffirm our commitment for the defense and promotion of the rights of Indigenous peoples. The International Day of Indigenous Peoples was proclaimed by the United Nations on December 23rd of 1994 during the international. The objective of this proclamation is to acknowledge and commemorate the significant progress in the promotion and protection of Indigenous peoples' rights. To start the first meeting, initiating the first work group on Indigenous group on 82. This group was fundamental for the Declaration of the United Nations on Indigenous peoples' rights that establishes a universal framework of rights and that acknowledges the importance politically and socially. We embrace the fight of each of you in your different territories. In order to start this program, we have the convening ceremony by Ana Francisca. She is Maya Pocomán. She's a focal point of the Indigenous Women Network in Guatemala. She was part from 2018, from 2008 through 2011, and she was in charge of the negotiation. She is a specialist in gender studies, environmental studies, indigenous studies. She's a lawyer and has worked with women in violence. And spiritually, she's now part of the National Association of Lawyers, and she's the president of her community, her Pocomán community. We kindly request our sister Ana to please initiate the ceremony.
Ana, ¿estás por ahí?
Ana, are you there?
Sakwata hatontera. Tioshtir unla irsaniklo. Kakarwa huntsepanala. Ushakal, Ushulev. Riuntere la kamaniki naki onanta la ishakim y haala y masak. Muy buenos días a todas.
Good morning to all of you brothers and sisters. Today is a day to reflect, to commemorate for all of those people who have given us the legacy of life, fight, and livelihood. Today in our Mayan calendar, we have those talk the duality of women and men. If you're able to see here, there is this there is this incense burner that we utilize to request pardon and also to make petitions. And from the 4 cardinal points from where you are, you can use this to request favors from the Atog grandma. You can also offer your your penitences, you can also ask for the health of your families, for prosperity and the protection of our communities. Also for the fight of each of us who are working on biodiversity, fighting for the defense of territories. Talk means the sun, and it also is a representative also on earth. Tohil is the sacred ceremonial fire. It also represents the law of cause and effect, the reward to Mother Earth and to all of the elements of and the creator and the shaper, creator. And this virtual in training is framed around the reflection about the Indigenous peoples' fight and their commemoration. One of the objectives of this global framework is to minimize the impact of climate change on biodiversity, and also it is to promote the mitigation, adaptation, and risk mitigation and disaster mitigation based on nature-based solutions. And these nature-based solutions, that's where we are as women, as wise women, protector women, and knowledgeable women, but also our male brothers who now today is we're representing duality by CAMTO. We request the creator for the protection of duality so that we can rescue those principles and values in regards to Mother Nature. For those solutions based on nature, right there is where the future generations lie. The women, the youth, who are the present and future of the conservation and rescue of Mother Nature. For that reason, I ask all of you right now, by means of this fire, to close your eyes for just a few seconds to ask and to give, because we're not only going to receive from Mother Earth, but we also are going to give. Ask forgiveness for all of the damages done to seas, rivers, and mountains for like 5 to 6 seconds, please.
De esta misma manera encendemos.
Likewise, we light up the 4 cardinal points candles that represent life, wisdom, the stone, the sacred stones also are part of an entire Mother Nature.
Una, dos, tres.
1, 2, 3.
Gracias.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Creator and Maker.
Muchísimas gracias, querida hermana.
Thank you so much, dear sister Anna, for your words. Precisely today, such an important day. In order to move on, Anna is going to continue. She's going to continue there, right next to such an important fire. And just to continue, we're going to give the floor to our regional coordinator, Florina Lopez. Please, Florina, go ahead.
Muy buenos días a todos y todas,
Good
hermanas y
day
hermanos, en este día tan
to all of you,
especial,
brothers and
tan
sisters, in such
trascendental.
a special
Y como lo
day, such a
decían, es un día
transcendental
de
day.
reflexión.
And as Anna was saying,
Justamente
a
hoy,
day
día 9
for
de agosto, Día
reflection. Precisely
Internacional de los
today,
Pueblos
August the
Indígenas,
9th,
primero que nada
the
quiero
International Day of
saludar
Indigenous People. I
en
first
este
of all would like to
contexto, pues
greet
seguir
within this
celebrando
context,
la
to
lucha,
greet
la
you
vida
and
también
to
de
invite you to
diferentes
continue
ciudadanos
celebrating
y
the fight and the life
ciudadanas,
of those who've
valga
given
la
their lives
redundancia, por la defensa
for
de la
the
tierra, de la
defense of the
naturaleza, de la vida
land,
misma, de la gran
nature,
biodiversidad.
life itself, the
Y
great
seguir en
biodiversity.
ese trabajo, seguir
And
en esa
let's
lucha
keep
como
working,
hermanos y
let's keep
hermanas.
fighting as brothers
Desde
and
la Red
sisters.
de Mujeres Indígenas
From
sobre
the Indigenous
Biodiversidad, quiero
Women
darle una gran bienvenida a este
Network,
primer
I
seminario
want to
virtual que
welcome you to
tendremos,
this
como lo
first online
decía
seminar,
Hortensia.
which we
Son
will hold,
5
as Hortensia
talleres
said, for
virtuales
5
que tenemos con este
times.
objetivo de seguir
We have 5
fortaleciendo las
online
capacidades de
workshops
todas y
to
todos,
continue
de los
strengthening the
jóvenes, de
capacities
los
of all of
mayores,
us.
de los líderes,
of the youth, the senior members and the leaders to continue proposing fighting, to continue impacting on the recognition precisely of the rights of Indigenous people and the entire biodiversity that exists in our territories. It is precisely because of that. And this is one of the activities that we will have. And I especially want to thank Lanislai for sharing this work, the support that we're receiving from the International Fund of Indigenous Women to complete the seminar. And I also want to thank the team of women we have in the network. I really want to thank you all. And I want to encourage you to take advantage of each and all of the workshops that will be conducted, because precisely we're using all of the resources, and sometimes with the resources that are sometimes scarce, we cannot get in person to all of those communities that we would like. But by means of these new technologies, we feel that it makes it easier for us to share all of this learning experiences, capacities that each of us has. And also, in this context of the next COP16, we want to work on all of these topics, and even further than that, at the level of our countries, it is necessary to monitor the implementation of all of these agreements, of all of these contracts that are adopted, or conventions that are adopted on behalf of the state. So I wish you all success during the seminars, and I want to thank you. I want to thank the facilitators, moderators, and the hosts that are giving us their time for us to share. So thank you so much, and please go ahead. Thank you so much, dear Florina Lopez Miro, representing the Panamanian Kunan people. Thank you so much. And to start talking about the matters, we have two main subjects. One is the participation of the Indigenous peoples in the Biological Diversity Convention. That's going to be in charge of Ramiro Batzin. And the second topic is the progress in the recognition of the rights of the Indigenous peoples under the Biological Diversity Framework in the Kunming-Montreal Global Framework. That will be led by Edith Bastidas. To start, we'll present Ramiro Batzin. He represents the Maya Cachiquel people from Guatemala. He is the co-chair of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. He's an expert in the use, management, conservation of natural cultural resources. He's a specialist in communication for development, indigenous rights, safeguards, traditional knowledge, consultancy of prior and free consentment, biodiversity, climate change, with a territorial focus. He is internationally and nationally also, and also in the formulation and management of projects. He is an executive director of the Sourcing Association and current vice president of another institution. After that, we'll listen to this, and we'll also have a space for questions and answers. Please, Ramiro, go ahead. Thank you, Hortensia. It is really a pleasure to greet all of the brothers and sisters that are here, especially today when we're commemorating the International Day of Indigenous Peoples. It is really very important for Indigenous peoples to celebrate and commemorate this day, because it also represents a milestone of all of the work that our brothers and sisters, grandparents and grandfathers and grandmothers have done, and they did a very important work. We want to thank the Network of Indigenous Women on Biodiversity for the invitation. Please receive from FIIB a kind greeting. And we want to tell you that the process of participation of Indigenous people regarding the Biodiversity Convention is key to have this network of Indigenous women. The female network here has been one of the organizations that with FIIB have completed an entire construction and dialogue process that we're going to see today. So I really want to thank you all, each and all of you that have always been supporting FIIB. And as I always say, FIIB has a strong arm, which is the Indigenous Women Network, and that arm has been contributing not only in the construction of the framework of the CDB, I'm sorry, but also at a territorial level, local level, national level. Each and all of you have a very important role in all of this. And I'll just summarize what we have been developing all together. First of all, I would like to present ourselves. It is important to, when it comes to participation, it is important to mention what have we done with the CDB and FIIB, which is the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. It is a set of representatives of indigenous governments and organizations, indigenous leaders, academics, activists, etc. It is a set of brothers and sisters, women and men, young, that have been participating, that have been putting in their effort and work. And this started in 1996 or maybe even before. Um, and that was one of the main results of FIIB during the third conference of the parties in Buenos Aires, Argentina, when FIIB was conformed, and the 7 regions of the world that decided to constitute this. It is important to see that during the life of the convention, FIIB has been present during the entire life of the convention. FIIB has made an important work right there. Everyone knows that it is acknowledged by the convention. It is one of the most important groups. It is one of the consultancy groups that CGB has, and that is very important to know. This participation process is giving results. We have as an objective to facilitate and support the full and effective participation of indigenous people in CBD in CDB that will guarantee their rights and those contributions, those support that the indigenous people have towards the conservation of biodiversity. All of this work that has been made during these years has been work that has yielded fruits. As I always say, more people will come in the future. There have been brothers and sisters in the past that have made the work, and we have to acknowledge that they've made a really good job. How are we working right now? How are we carrying out this incidents and dialogue process? You know that we have a caucus that gets together every Saturday at 8 a.m. Montreal time. Many of you have been connected, have been contributing. Many of you are group coordinators. Many of you are coordinators of the work. You've built the proposals. You've been facilitating politically and technically this entire process. But there are 7 coordinations for Africa, for Latin America, Asia, North America, the Arctic, Central Europe, East Europe, and the Pacific. Each of the coordinators that have been there have a support from their organizations, and they're the ones working and coordinating. And today we have 3 co-chairs: Lucy from Africa, Lakpa from Asia, and myself, rep for Latin America. This came up because during COVID, we had to, as the co-chairs, I'm sorry, we need to work in COP in Kunming, and it was not done. It was changed. It was postponed. So we always have a co-chair belonging to the country or region where COP will be organized. And that's where we also that's where we have 3 co-chairs right now. We have a secretariat that has been supporting and working very hard. And today our secretariat is expanding. We are on the way to COP, and that makes us have much more work. Today we have communication, we have support, we have an entire series of work that is making us get to a COP with proposals, which we will see later on. Achievements regarding our participation, as I've said, acknowledged by several decisions, such as the organ that advises COP on the application of Article 8J. It is important to see this and acknowledge this because this is a result of the participation of the brothers and sisters. We have substantive contributions to the application of the work program. Today we'll see that later on. Contributions regarding the guidelines and traditional knowledge. The designation of the co-chair of the 8J working group and members of the table or friends of the table. It is important to acknowledge this because this is a result. When the 8J gets together, we have a co-chair, one indigenous and one from a state, and that is key because that is a good result that allows us to be in the front of negotiations and to lead those negotiations. The contributions during the negotiation of the Nagoya Protocol were also key. Many of you were present in this process. Florina, Edith, Dr. Viviana, Hortensia, anyway, more and more brothers and sisters who were there supporting and contributing to all of this work. And it was very important, the work that they did. Contributions during the negotiation of the strategic plan for biodiversity, in 2011 through 2020 that just closed now, which is also important to assess that plan to know the extent of its progress when it comes to Indigenous people. We've made contributions during the negotiations for the global framework for biodiversity after 2020, which we call the post 20. And I don't want to stop here. Further ahead, we'll get into that. But these are your achievements. FIIB's achievements are important to be acknowledged. It's important to acknowledge them. And this allows us to have an entire work process, an entire articulation process that is worked on every single day by means of your work at a community level. For example, it has been shown, we have shown study cases of the role of Indigenous women on traditional knowledge, the role of Indigenous women on the participation. Actually, we have several publications, and I encourage you to check out the FIIB website, which has been changed right now, so that we can have a website that keeps us updated and that keeps us informed about the permanent work that has been conducted, and so that we can be more informed. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have the opportunity to see the website. But it is important to mention the work of the brothers and sisters, and it's important to mention how we have contributed with our grain of with our work. Here we have the post-2020 participation. It was cut by COVID, so to say. The pandemic cut off, and then we had 2 years of work that was made. In 2019, we were actively participating in the SABSTA in Montreal with the working group AJ also in Montreal. And we also conducted dialogues between communities and Indigenous people. The first dialogue occurred in 2019. In 2020, we were strongly working also with dialogues. Once again, we conducted an entire online work. This was very important, to give that step from, this transition from in-person activities towards online activities. I know that it's difficult. I know that our communities do not have good internet connection, but it also allowed FIIB to move from 1 or 2 meetings to 20, 25 meetings for FIIB meetings. It was interesting. And today we are able to get together every Saturday. We're almost around 100 delegates present there, and that's very important. We always have the 4 languages there: English, Spanish, French, Russian. That allows us to get together and to connect and to hold dialogue. So that it's also important to say, and that frames the participation that's important for the consultancy, for dialogue between and among the Indigenous organizations, and why not to say among states as well. We're having our dialogues with FIIB, with the Secretariat, with different states, regions, online. And this has been a huge achievement to go from the in-person modality to online modality. I know there are some constraints, but we have been evolving, progressing, working, and we're inviting everyone to join this process. 2022 was important as well. We had the SABSTA 24, the SBI 13. We were in Nairobi, in Montreal. We were several times in Montreal working and observing and seeing. We were concerned because the Kunming-Montreal, the Global Biodiversity Framework, it concerned us because we were afraid that it wouldn't take into account our expectations, proposals, and rights as women, men, and youth. We got together and we were working hard to reach an agreement for the biodiversity, which today we have proposed, so to say. It is important to acknowledge that participation, work, and effort of each of Paz, and that is today on materialize on the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Global Framework. We have a key objective C that concerns the rights of Indigenous people. It regards the traditional knowledge. It regards the lands, territories, and as we said, it is the link, it is the hook to the 23 targets, those 23 goals that today reflect the Indigenous peoples, the rights. We have goal 1 that regards the spatial planification of the territories, lands, waters that are in Indigenous territories. Target 2 linked to the second and third, the use of land, and logically goal 3, which is the 30 by 30. Here we continue talking about protected areas. Today we're talking about other conservation measures like COMEX, but we're also mentioning the third way, and this is where I want to stop because this three-way is talks about the indigenous territories, and we're in Costa Rica right now with OICN to talk about how the interrelation is to be conducted, how we're going to make these goals operational. We need to see the indicators that are established. We need to analyze the guidelines. We need to see the reforms, the legal reforms, the judicial reforms in our countries. And we also need to work hard. Right now, we have here the third way now, but we need to implement it. And there's a strong hard work from brothers and sisters in FIIB, and you're also part of that. Target 4 regarding endemic species. Target 5 linked to wildlife and trade and capture of the wildlife. How is that related to AJ and BIC? There has to be some relation. The wildlife target 13, also 19 about funding, target 21 about traditional knowledge is key to see ourselves right there. Target 22 on human rights, target 23 on gender. It is important for us to take a look at these goals, for us to see these goals, these targets, and to find out how we are going to work on them. And a very important thing is the proposals that the Indigenous Women Network for Biodiversity. It's important to see the proposals that they have. And we are here to continue, not to start, but to continue this work that has started between the Network of Indigenous Women and FIIB, and why not to say also is strongly supported by the network of Latin American and Caribbean women, Indigenous women. So I think that any question, comment should be in relation to the implementation of such a global framework from the perspective of Indigenous women, the perspective of young Indigenous women and Indigenous grandmothers. That is very, very key. What are we proposing? Please take the time because sometimes I get carried away when I start presenting. But let me know. We here refer to the recognition of the contribution of land and territory of indigenous to the conservation of biodiversity, target 3, which is what we were talking about. We need to see how that contribution of land and territory will support the implementation, the conservation of biodiversity. And it is clear female women, female indigenous are the ones that have all of that information, that baggage about, they're the ones that are attached to the territory, the ones that work on the forest, on the water. And it is important to say that there are several studies that is good to analyze. We have one regarding the vision of indigenous women and the forest, elaborated by Dr. Edith. This is a document that to me is very important. It is a document that came from the feelings, the sentiment of women, the respect for indigenous people and territories, to establish the protected areas without the prior free and informed consent. We we say that protected areas have created conflict in the territories. We cannot deny there are protected areas where everything goes well with the indigenous territories, but we need to do that. Precisely yesterday, we were talking about the particularity of each of those areas. We need to see what happens internationally, what happens nationally, but also what happens locally, which is where the conservation actions are present. Increasing the contribution of benefits or the distribution of benefits. I'm sorry, that's very important. Many of you have worked on that topic that has had, and a proposal came out regarding the distribution of benefits. Today, those benefits are not equitable. Today, the companies continue to expropriate, exploit within the territories, and they're not letting that here, we also need to analyze the monetary benefits and the non-monetary benefits. For indigenous people, not everything is resources, not everything is money. So we need to see that, and there are proposals that have come up from the network, which are very interesting regarding the benefit distribution, the recognition of traditional knowledge and their protection. It is important to see the use of knowledge, of traditional knowledge, without free, prior, and informed consent. Here we have Mr. De la Cruz that proposes intellectual property work, that work that has been ongoing, this participation, this full and effective participation of the indigenous people on decision making about biodiversity that concerns Objective C and Target 22. This is the hook. This is what has us attached to this agreement and convention, and this is what we need to develop. Protection of the defenders or advocates of human and environmental rights. Today, our brothers and sisters are being criminalized. They are being assassinated. They are being intimidated, threatened. Their families are leaving their homes, their territories. We need to work hard on this. We cannot allow, or we cannot leave this aside. We know this has implications, but if we are together and united, we can develop a good network and good actions within the framework of defending ourselves. And we have always been proposing this. We have processes and coordinated work here. We have Landis Life, we have a FIIB, we have organizations that in one way or another have been developing this advocating job that will allow to stop the human rights violation, the direct access to indigenous people, to financial resources to support them later. Everything that we're developing, and we were just this week with Florina, we were getting together and having a dialogue about that. We've been working, we've been developing actions, we are conserving, but the resources are not getting to the communities. They are not arriving to women. They're not getting to women. I was seeing some studies this last weeks, and I was really impressed by the work that women do. An entire work that was developed in Panama regarding the perspective, the vision of women when it came to Jaguars, that monitoring process, that traditional monitoring process that they've conducted, the way in which they have transferred all of the information, all of that knowledge, all of that cosmovision around Jaguars. How do they transfer that to children with documentation, with bulletins, through meetings in schools, through theater? I was really impressed to see that work, that After work that is being conducted in Guatemala. I see Graciela is connected. That work with the girls, with the young girls that are recovering that traditional knowledge. Today, they are developing an entire mapping and an entire capacity strengthening for young men and women for the territorial work. That's key for the youth. You know, I always say youth are not future, they are the today. They need to assume this responsibility. So I congratulate each and all of the young women that are participating in this, because tomorrow you will be at the front of these processes and movements. It is important to see that the participation of indigenous peoples within the CDP framework has given results. When we're talking about the 8-day working group, we're talking about right now about digital data sequencing, and they always ask me about that. And I tell them this is a subject that we need to be trained about, each and all of us. Actually, FIIB has developed, it has a working group for digital sequencing. Our friend Preston has been progressing. Our sister Jenny have been developing. We have videos, we have presentations, which you can find in the website to get informed about what's been discussed regarding genetic resources. We're working on indicators. Mauricio and his colleague are doing an incredible work with the team, revising those indicators because we have the targets, we have the objectives, we have the goals, but if we don't go and see the indicators, it's going to be difficult. And here we need to make a full and effective participation on national plans. Each and all of you must have a dialogue with your state. You have to tell them that it is important for national plans to include such topics. These topics need to be included and debated about nationally and locally. The mobilization of resources, for example, the adaptation funds, the GEF subject. There has been important dialogue. Women have been having conversations with GEF. We have our delegate, who is part of the Women Network. Dr. Viviana has made an incredible work. Dr. Teran as well. She was participating for several years in that and left an amazing work there. That civilization of women and indigenous people has been incredible. What they've done. And who are they? Two sister members of the Indigenous Women Network that have worked very hard within the GEF process. Target 3 entails an entire discussion work, an entire discussion and work process. I'm sorry. It's a union between FIIB and ESRI and OICN to see that third way. We're seeing how we're going to implement and instrumentalize and to dialogue with the states. It's been worked on. There are around 129 member states in the coalition ambition, and it's important to see that there is another fund with the OICN that's being worked on, where organizations of indigenous people are present. FIIB is present. We're working on that. We've had Sister Anita, who's also part of the network, and she has been working and pushing for the creation of this fund that we hope in the future will provide good results. We were saying hopefully they are not long results. Hopefully we can cut this in the long term. Hopefully they can get earlier this year to women, the youth, for children, so that this work that they're developing can be strengthened. All of that work that there is today has an entire analysis process behind. When it comes to local communities and indigenous peoples, there's an entire discussion about the meaning of that for the meaning for the indigenous movement, the local communities, how to strengthen them, how to have blocks of group works as group work group for us to it is going to be an instrument, so we need to see how we're going to work on that. And the working group is working on that today. The consensus is also important to conduct a conceptualization process, a work process that has been progressing. We know we have the repatriation guidelines. We know that we have guidelines for the participation. We have different guidelines. For example, there the guidelines and concepts that are being given to us. We have the concepts document as well, that all of that, so all of those instruments are the result of the work and impact that we have had as indigenous peoples. What's going to happen in COP16? We're talking about having two great challenges. We know we have a document, we know we have a work program, we have a document that is in brackets that we need to liberate. That is important. That's why we're also convening to a traditional indigenous knowledge summit that will be held in this month from the 16th to 30. We're about going to we're about traveling we're about to travel to Colombia, and we're going to be the same number of indigenous people, the same number of states to hold a dialogue. We said, okay, let's create a roadmap. Let's see who are the allies, who are against, and who are undecisive, and let's bring them all together to discuss, because in COP we won't have time. We know time is very short during COP, so we're taking those days and weeks to conduct these discussions. It's going to be important to have your support. Several of you will be participating. Unfortunately, we wanted to have a big event, but we were not able to do that because of the resources. So we are making and organizing an event, not small, but an event where we're not going to have everyone. We're seeing all of the topics that will be discussed to see if we can do this online. We're working on that. And I just want to tell you that we're very thankful for the support that's been given so far. We have institutional agreements. We have a subsidiary permanent organ. You know that we've been talking about this, and the three proposals have been put on the table regarding institutional agreements. One was to continue with the HA. Another option was to distribute all of the tasks within the organs. And the third one was the subsidiary organs. Today, we're working towards the permanent subsidiary organ. The working group has given good results and all, but we also know that they have constraints, they have limitations because of funds. We know that everything has been difficult around that. Our sister Hortensia has been working very hard within the commission, the committee, the funds committee. She that has been with the CGB, and there are presentations. Once again, we analyze we see the participation of indigenous women of the from the network. Here, we also touch on indicators. We need to keep working on that. We need to take those indicators and implement them into the national plans. We need to make to SWIP to see everything regarding females, particularly indigenous women. This is a work that we still have left, and I know that all together with the network, we will be able to achieve that. Everything that regards the digital sequencing, that's also key. And in Kunming-Montreal and COP, we need to give a step forward. And for that, it is essential to have a work plan, an agreement, and an organ working for indigenous people. These are the two key positions that FIIB is leading. We know that the network is joining that effort. We know that we have an entire coordination work to get to COP, to get to the summit of nature, and the Nature and Culture Summit that will be held within the framework of COP as well. The doctor is working very hard on that. She's been monitoring that, and this is an incredible strong work, hard work from women. So I believe their participation is here, and what has been difficult is to acknowledge and visibilize that. And I think that today, within in the framework of the International Day for Indigenous People, we should do that. And that's why I am saying names. And I'm sorry for the people I won't mention, because I really didn't have to mention everyone here, because each and all of you has done an incredible job in your communities, in your countries, here in this work, King framework, in each of the teams. We were talking about this with the technical group of the FIIB, that since all of them are women, and it is very important to have a strong team that is the base, right? That is the base that is proposing and building. It's very important for that to be indigenous women. That provides us a good, strong position and presence of the indigenous people within the framework of the implementation of Kunming-Montreal. So thank you to each and all of you for your time. Thank you to the network, and I want to end here. Thank you so much, dear Ramiro, for all of the information that you're providing us. Undoubtedly, that gives us input to answer some questions. Some people are hearing about this for the first time. There are other people that are more informed about this. Let's continue with Edith Bastidas, and soon after that, we'll hold a Q&A space. Edith is from the Pastos peoples from Colombia, from the Nariño department. She is a professional lawyer. She has working experience in environmental and biodiversity matters, traditional knowledge, climate change, protected areas, indigenous peoples, and women, indigenous women. She has experience in the local international scope. She works on intercultural work, and she also has a relation with the Colombian Association and Society, I'm sorry, and the International Society. She also works in biodiversity for Latin America and the Caribbean and other international platforms as the Indigenous International Forum on Biodiversity. We're going to give the floor to Edith, please. And please, I beg you to maintain your mics off so that then we can have the Q&A session so that these brothers and sisters who are panelists will respond, who know very much about all of these subjects. Thank you, dear Hortensia. Good morning, brothers and sisters in the webinar. I don't know if you can give me authorization to share my screen, please.
Si puedes compartir.
Yes, you can share.
No, ya vi la opción.
Oh,
Espérame
yeah,
un
I
segundo.
just saw the option. Just 1 second, please.
Espero que estén viendo la presentación.
I
¿Sí
hope
se
you're
ve?
able to see it now.
Sí se
Yes,
ve.
we can see it.
Vale, de acuerdo. Entonces,
Great.
el tema que me han propuesto
So the
es los pueblos
topic
indígenas y
is
los aportes
Indigenous
para el reconocimiento de
peoples
sus
and the
derechos
contributions
dentro
for
del
the
Convenio
recognition
de
of their
Diversidad Biológica
rights
y sus
within the
avances dentro del marco
Biological
mundial de
Diversity
Kunming-Montreal.
Convention and
Entonces,
the
pues ya
progress within the
tuvimos
global
toda esta
framework for
importante introducción
the
que hace
coming
Ramiro, pues
Montreal.
desde la experiencia
Well,
que hemos tenido en
from
el
the
Foro
experience we've
Internacional
had in the International Indigenous
sobre
Forum
Biodiversidad
on
y para
biodiversity
llegar al convenio, creo
and
que es
to get to the
importante
convention,
hacer
I
mención
think
pues
that it is
de
important to
diferentes
mention
aspectos.
different aspects.
No sé, ¿están viendo en modo
Are
presentación o
you
archivo? No
seeing
sé.
the presentation or file mode? I'm
Modo
not
archivo.
sure. File mode.
Modo archivo,
File
vamos a
mode.
tratar de
Okay,
poner la
let's try
presentación. ¿Se ve
to set
presentación?
it and so that we can see it as a presentation. Can you see as a presentation now?
No.
No, not yet.
No, bueno, entonces
Well,
creo que lo voy a
I
dejar
think
en
that I'm
archivo
just
porque
gonna
tal
leave
vez
it like
no
that
no me permite.
because I don't know if I have the
Entonces quiero empezar
authorization. Anyway,
hablando de
I
por
want
qué
to
han sido
start talking about
importantes
the
los convenios
importance
internacionales,
about the
porque
importance of
como
international
sabemos,
agreements
hoy
because as we
justamente que
know
es el Día
today
Internacional de los
precisely
Pueblos Indígenas,
that
los pueblos
that is
indígenas
the
somos
Indigenous Peoples
muchísimos.
Day.
A veces pues
There are
conocemos
many,
de
many of
nuestra
us. Sometimes
región, los
we
de
know
nuestro
those
país,
from our region,
pero
from our
en general
country,
pues
but
tenemos
in
una
general,
diversidad
well,
muy
we have
grande
a very,
en todos
very
los continentes y los
extensive
pueblos indígenas
diversity in
somos
all of the continents,
tan
and as Indigenous
diferentes, ¿no?
people, we
¿Y
are so different from
en
each
qué nos
other.
hemos unido? Pues
And
justamente en la defensa
we
de
have
nuestros
gotten
derechos.
together for the
En
defense
ese
of our
campo,
rights,
uno de los
precisely. So
factores que han
in
podido
that
unificar y
context, one of the
desarrollar nuestros
factors that
instrumentos a nivel
has
normativo
been
ha
able
sido
to
los convenios
unify us
internacionales.
at the instrument
¿Por qué?
level
Pues
has
porque
been
las
international
normatividades en los diferentes
conventions, because
países son
the regulations in
asimismo
different countries are
diferentes. En
also
algunos países se
different. In
reconocen
some
a los pueblos,
countries,
en
the
otros ni
peoples
siquiera se
are
reconoce la
acknowledged.
existencia de
In
los
others,
pueblos, mucho
not
menos
even
se
their
va a
existence is
reconocer sus
acknowledged,
derechos.
even less their rights.
Entonces,
So
los convenios
the
internacionales pues
international
son de alguna
agreements
forma un
somehow
estándar
are a standard,
mínimo de
a minimum
reconocimiento
standard
de esos
for the
derechos
recognition of
y han
such
sido
rights.
importantes
And
porque
they have been important
justamente subrayo
because I
que
want to emphasize this.
tienen efectos
They have
concientizadores sobre la población no indígena.
awareness
Em,
effect
a
on
veces
the
las
non-Indigenous
autoridades locales
population.
se
Sometimes
niegan
local
a
authorities
reconocer estos derechos de los
reject or
pueblos
deny
indígenas.
them to
Incluso
refuse
en
to
algunas
acknowledge these
regiones, al
rights.
menos
And
de
even
Colombia,
in
los
some
pueblos
regions,
le
at least in
decían
Colombia,
a una
peoples
autoridad
will
local,
tell
bueno, ustedes
local
tenemos
authority,
derechos en
well,
el
look,
convenio
we have rights
169,
according
que fue
to
aprobado
agreement
por la ley 21.
169 approved
Entonces
by
decía la
law
autoridad,
number
no,
21. And
ustedes
then the
están
authority will say, no, no,
aumentando
no, no,
esos
you're
derechos,
making
¿no?
those rights. You're making those rights up.
Realmente, pues hay
Because
una
in reality,
discriminación tan
there is
fuerte
such a
que no
strong
se cree siquiera que los
discrimination
pueblos indígenas
that they don't
puedan
even
tener
believe
algunos
that
derechos.
Indigenous people
Entonces, ¿qué
could
hacen
have
estas
some
normas
rights. So
internacionales? Pues
what do these
concientizar
international
a la
regulations do?
población
They
sobre
bring
la
awareness to the
existencia de esos
population about the
derechos.
existence of
Por
such
otro lado,
rights.
pues
On the other hand,
el mismo
the
contenido de estos
content itself
convenios
of such
pues hace
conventions
que efectivamente puedan
makes
tener esos derechos una
these
vigencia efectiva
rights to be effectively enforced, and they make these rights demandable. I know that there are some resources like the guardianship action in Colombia, for example, by means of which we can request the application of fundamental rights, even the right to a prior consultation. But these international agreements have not been established by the goodwill of states. No, the indigenous peoples have had a relevant role, among them indigenous women, for these conventions to be materialized. So a few years back, the people started to get organized, to participate in international spaces, to see, for example, Bolivian peoples had their own fights, those of Ecuador as well, those from Colombia also, those from Mexico as well. But maybe in other countries like the Philippines, they're also fighting for their rights. Over there in Kenya, the same thing in Africa. So we started to get together, to know each other, and to get organized. That is why there are several indigenous rights platforms for indigenous women as well. All of them are valid and respectable. So people started participating. There are very interesting stories about when our elders got for the first time to these United Nations scenarios, for example. And it was unknown, but with their strong voices that came from the strength that their communities and territories and culture give them. And that has been important in these scenarios. On the other hand, in the world, we talk more and more about human rights every time. And among those rights, we have also seen the requirement of acknowledging the rights of indigenous peoples. And something that has favored us is globalization. As you know, we now have these new technologies. I'm sure that now we are connected from different countries. So all of these and globalization is facilitating and allowing us to get together, to see each other, and to impact internationally. In this impact, then uh, what happened? We got one of the most important and first norms, a Convention 169 of OIT. Let's remember that before Convention 169, our elders managed to have Convention 107 from 1957. It is worth mentioning that in some countries that convention is still in force, that intends to acknowledge the rights of indigenous people. But what's the difference between these Convention 107 and 169 is that 107 did acknowledge, yes, the existence of indigenous people, but since it is outdated, it said, "Oh, we need to integrate them to education, to the majority of the society, to the predominant economy and system and society, and even the religion, and so on and so on." But then, Convention 169 is very important and represents a milestone because it is recognizing the people as different and not as people that need to be integrated. So, on the other hand, I also want to mention the Declaration of the United Nations on the Rights of Indigenous People. Such declaration, as we know, is very important. In some countries, it's enforcement is questioned because it is a declaration, unlike Convention 169, because it is a convention, and when countries subscribe it, it is mandatory. The declaration some countries consider, or some judicial framework, that is not binding. However, it will be counteracting, and it will be contradictory, because we see the UN Declaration about Human Rights, but no one questions its efficacy and application or validity. So, in the same way, the Declaration of United Nations on Rights of Indigenous People, we believe that was created for something, for it to be enforced and for it to be considered internationally and nationally. That declaration was negotiated for 22 years. It was adopted in 2007 in the plenary session of the United Nations, number 69, and 143, session 61, I'm sorry, 143 countries voted in favor, and 4 against, and 11 did not vote, among them Colombia, but then Colombia also ratified the acceptance of the declaration. Also, we need to mention, since it is an important context for what we're going to talk about here regarding CGB, that the Declaration of the United Nations includes very strong aspects, among them the right to equality and non-discrimination, which is one of the first ones, the importance of respecting the identity and cultural integrity. So we are now in a new paradigm. We were no longer considered as if like we need to be integrated. It actually respects us as different, at least at a speech level. On the other side, the meaning of collective rights, it is also a great step that we're giving in different spaces, even in constitutions and legal actions of the countries, in the sense that we are not only persons, individual persons, but we are part of a collective, and therefore we also have rights as a collective, and that is reaffirmed in the United Nations Declaration. Another topic that is very important and related to the free determination, this is a really strong concept, and from there emerges the reason why some countries, especially the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, in the beginning voted against the declaration, precisely because it mentioned the free determination. It talked about autonomy and consentment. And so the argument of these countries was that when you acknowledge a free determination, indigenous people will seek to get independence from the countries. And that, as an anecdote, we were saying that within our context of indigenous Latin American people, in reality, that's not a decision taken that we're going to get independence from the countries. Even if we are a people from Colombia, we've never considered to have a different country. But it turns out that other peoples in other countries have considered that they are a state and they want to be a different country. Now, that's what countries have been afraid of. That's why in international scenarios and even in the CDB scenario, you always hear that countries are scared when they say peoples, when they say free determination, when they say uh, free, prior, and informed consent. All of that they're afraid of. On the other side, another fundamental topic for all of the peoples is the resources, territories, and lands matter. And also tied to that, the development, uh, uh, the development with identity, and therefore the need for repair and compensation. So in general lines, those are the most important topics that are touched in the Declaration of the United Nations. And with very quickly, I just want to mention two fundamental instruments that regard the rights of the indigenous people, Convention 169 and the UN Declaration, because we enter in CGB now. Ramiro already gave us context about the participation of FIIB in this story. So I just want to recap several topics. This indigenous participation has not been granted by the states. It has actually been a struggle, a fight in the different spaces. And it couldn't be the exception. This Cumbre de la Tierra, Earth Summit in 1992. Indigenous people here already appear as a small organization. We didn't have the international structure of other international organizations, but people they already saw each other with the different ways of seeing the world, but with elements in common like the defense of consultation, territory, participation, defense of culture, and then they make an incidence on this, they make an impact in this summit. And then we have then several important achievements. We need to mention that people were all different and there are different postures as well. There are people who consider that the fact of participating means that we're validating everything that country states do. Others consider that's important to participate, to make your voice be heard, because otherwise, then how could we impact these scenarios? So that's why there is this double interpretation right there. But on the other hand, because people participate, because really diversity, which was one of the important subjects addressed in the Earth Summit, is which is where Indigenous peoples are. So if they're going to talk about our territories, then they're going to talk about our diversity and our rights, then we need to be present in those spaces. And that's what has giving us more necessity of participating in these convention spaces. And now the International Indigenous Forum has the first session in the third conference of the parties, COP3. Now we're going to go to Cali to COP16 within the framework of the biodiversity, biological biodiversity. That's done every 3 years. So you can see for how long the Indigenous Forum has been working and existing. And also there is Resolution L3 that starts to establish within a process to see how Article 8J will be applied. Article 8J, it refers to traditional knowledge that was part of the impact of Indigenous people on the Biological Diversity Convention. And then in L3, they say, okay, then how we're going to implement those knowledge. Then after this, we conform a working group about that 8J article, and the first meeting was held in Sevilla. I think that was in the year, what? I think this is 1999 or 2000, something like that, when the first AJ session in Sevilla took place. Actually, we had a lot of expectation as people, as Indigenous people, and then the meeting didn't turn out to be what we expected. The meeting continues to be managed by the states, imposing their agendas, and actually, the Indigenous people were so disappointed that they actually abandoned the CDB process in that Sevilla meeting, because they said, okay, we've made it this far to have a group that will collect our aspirations, proposals, but we're going to always feel excluded. So they just abandoned that work. Others have continued trying to generate an impact. And also in COP4 in Bratislava, women also got organized as a stakeholder that, even if it makes part, and of course it presents the proposals of the Indigenous people in general, we also have specific aspirations. And in that sense, the network of women then is organized, especially since COP4 in Bratislava, it started to take more strength. And I'm going to jump, because of time as well, to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. What has happened since Argentina, when FIIB started to be created, and then the Indigenous Network starts to be conformed as well? Many things happened, and FIIB, precisely, even if it's not an organization, it's a platform that starts as a more planned and articulated and organized platform. And in that sense, we started having technical teams for a while now. And with that, the participation within the framework of the CDB and other platforms, that it is more qualified. You maybe will see that for each of the COP, there are many, many documents to read, many, many topics, many, many meetings. So what do? We get organized in work. We get organized in working groups. Every group studies some documents. They present it before the FIIB, as Ramiro was saying. We have our caucus on Saturdays, about the meetings. And in those sessions, every group presents, we reach consensus about several postures and positions, and that's why leads us to the official CDB meetings. And then that more planned and more organized and technical work has had achievements that are important. In that sense, as Ramiro said, Target 3 was a red line for us, meaning that we're not going to give in, we're not going to surrender as people, as Indigenous people. We always establish our red lines and where we're not able to surrender. So first, we need the recognition of Indigenous people, the Indigenous territories as conservation scenarios by themselves without the need of declaratories, maybe as a protected area, for example. But we also need the recognition of our rights to consultation, to free and voluntary and informed consent, and the right to conservation. So those were the key points in Target 3, and here's where I start to tie all of the Convention 169 and the declaration with the Biodiversity Agreement, the coming Montreal Framework. And we have recently realized that even if in Montreal 2 years ago in COP15, we managed to get the recognition of Target 3 and the entire rights and territorial and consent topics. We achieved that, but now we observe that they are trying to remove importance and strength. And unfortunately, the funders that contribute with resources for the conservation are conditioning indigenous people and local communities. They are telling them that they need to constitute protected official areas in order to access the funds. So for me, that is perverse because we all know that the great majority, there are exceptional cases, but the great majority of protected areas don't have participation of indigenous people. Once an official area is separated, indigenous people are just considered as park rangers, as operational stakeholders. So you lose the governability and governance. So we want to recover the proposal that we had for Target 3. Like Ramiro said, we're working in workshops with OICN and other stakeholders, but our posture is always clear, and we need our territorial rights to be respected and our rights to autonomy. And again, I link the rights matter as well that has been proposed at CDP, and it consists on, and precisely as Indigenous people, we're one of the stakeholders that defended that perspective of human rights in Montreal, not only the rights of Indigenous people, I'm sorry, but in general, human rights. And from there, and hence, for example, in one of the goals, we emphasized, for one of the goals, we emphasized that it was necessary to consider what in Latin America we already have in relation with the Escazon Agreement, which is the right to information, to participation, but also the right to environmental justice. That is, in reality, a proposal from us, from the indigenous people, that is endorsed by several states that have been sensitive with this topic, and that was established in the framework, that entire rights perspective, and that's very important. On the other hand, another point that we managed to defend as with this red line is everything related to the free, prior, and informed consent, and the prior in the consultation in relation with the actions that will be executed every time they're going to touch the territories and even the knowledge of indigenous people. And that was established in the rights framework. We also need to consider that we managed to have in this opportunity a specific goal regarding girls and women. In the prior framework, the so-called IG goals, there was no specific goal regarding girls and women. Now, as Indigenous women were supporting this proposal, which was obviously supported by women from different spaces. And at the end, it was established, we managed to establish it as a goal 23. We believe these are important milestones in rights matters. And I'd say that this is something that and something that affects the entire Kunming-Montreal framework is the mention of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. This was achieved and it is key. I'm sorry, I left my, oh, okay. We believe that it is key because, and that's why I mentioned it in the beginning, because the declaration has a very wide framework. We see that the declaration is a very advanced instrument. However, it is an international standard that needs to be considered in all of these scenarios where we refer to indigenous people subjects. So we managed to have that reference that mentioned that declaration in this occasion. And likewise, we are doing in different scenarios. For example, recently, the an instrument within the framework of the World Organization of Intellectual Property was included in one of the successes for the indigenous people, which is exactly to consider and to use as a reference the UN Declaration about the Rights of Indigenous People. And I'm sure that in the future we will hold a seminar specifically to address this instrument of the United Nations. And within this context, then, what challenges have we found for the positioning of those effective rights for in order to make this human rights effective within this entire Kunming-Montreal framework? First, indigenous people, we are not part of the CDBs. It's actually the states. We are considered as observers, but with the strength that FIIB has had and the Women's Network, we are considered as major groups. So major groups are the ones that have strong incidence and impact within this framework. We have won the right that we already have of for intervening as indigenous peoples in these scenarios, and also having a co-chair, also as Ramiro mentioned, in the working groups, in the AJ working groups, and maybe in other stages. So those are wins already, right? And on the other side, which are the challenges? Well, there are many scenarios, right? We have the Climate Change Convention, biodiversity.
Disculpa, Edith, por
I'm
favor,
sorry,
cerrar el
Edith,
micrófono,
would you
Liliana.
please mute your mic? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying something. Okay. Anyway, I was saying that there are more scenarios and diverse scenarios that people participate in here and there, and that will be like the following challenge that I propose is that agendas are defined by the parties in these scenarios, and sometimes our agendas are left behind somehow or left aside somehow. So there's another thing, and Ramiro was exemplifying this very well when he said that we wanted to create a very huge summit, but we didn't have enough resources. That continues to be a challenge, even though in this planification and organization, well, we are managing this. We're to achieve the interpretation, to achieve the food and maybe transportation services as well, but that always continues to be a challenge, just scarcity of financial resources. So within that framework, there are several proposals so that we can continue having an impact and achieving the positioning of our rights in all of these scenarios. And first of all, having an impact that will achieve results, right? You know, that full and effective participation in the different organs of CDB. Why? Because CDB has a COP that will be held in Colombia, but there are more scenarios. There is a monitoring framework that has another scenario. There's also the SAPS that is a technical group. There are the working groups such as the working group on the AJ working groups. So, you know, having a participation in the different scenarios, that participation that is planned and effective, you know. And as I was saying, there are different conventions as well. So what we need to do is to be able to coordinate the different proposals for those scenarios that hopefully we will have the same dynamic, right, in all of these scenarios. On the other side, we also believe that we need to strengthen everything related to the rights of women in the CDP, even if there was previously a gender strategy in this Montreal Kunming-Montreal framework, there was also a gender strategy established. We also have a target 23. Now, what do we have to do now? Not only women, but everyone. We need to continue working on the implementation and the effective implementation of this subject. Also, we need to try to strengthen in different aspects, but obviously from the financial point of view, the autonomous spaces of the peoples to analyze their agenda and positioning so that the states don't move us towards their agenda. And second, for the financial entities not to move us towards their agendas. So sometimes the people present the proposals, but there's no money for that. But then we do have for the Constitution of Protected Areas on indigenous territories without a prior consultation. So that we believe needs to continue to be assessed. And another thing, and I have highlighted this, right now, all of the countries by mandate of COP15 are updating their strategies and action plans on biodiversity. You are surely going to listen to this acronym in your country, NBSAP. These are strategies and action plans on biodiversity that are currently being updated because that is one of the tasks that the countries need to submit in the different meetings that we will be holding now in Cali. And it is key, brothers and sisters, in your different countries to see how this process is being conducted, and we need to participate. In Colombia, the process has been a little bit wider than it has been before because we are the host of COPE. So we've had different meetings per group, per regions, I'm sorry, and interest groups. So we need to, there's also a website in Colombia. We'll have to see if they have that in other countries, but you can send your contributions for this strategy. So the recommendation is to be looking out for that and for us to include right there our aspirations so that they can be established in a plan that countries have, and so that resources can be injected in there for the implementation. What else can we do? We can conduct study cases in the countries about the situation of biodiversity, traditional knowledge, the perspectives from the perspectives of the peoples and their organizations, and for those results to then be reflected in the national and global reports. It is worth mentioning that there is an official report about the implementation of the agreement, which is led by the Secretary of the Convention, which is called Perspectives on Biological Biodiversity. And the indigenous peoples have also created a local perspectives where they include these study cases. So I believe this is a great opportunity to visualize our topics, to have our studies, our own studies, and to document them by ourselves. And so that these reports, so that they can be part of such reports. Also, tools. I included here comparative matrix, but there are other tools as well. Sometimes are drawings or sheets, fact sheets that will allow us to impact those global decisions. Maybe what for? To take them to the OASE, to socialize that with our people and to come up with proposals and to make an impact with that. And also strengthening the entire financial aspect in the CBD framework. There is a voluntary framework that supports the participation of indigenous leaders, but the funds are very restricted in several meetings. Sometimes one person is financed per region, so it will be 7 persons. In some meetings, there are just 2 persons financed, so there's always very little people that are able to fund the official. And there are so please, to continue with this conversation for now, that will be what I wanted. That was what I wanted to tell you, and I would like to thank you for this participation. Thank you, dear Edith, for giving us this chronology, this background of the CDP, and that's why we're here for, to update this and to have an impact on those who are listening and participating in this seminar, and as I did saying, governments are building the strategies and action plans for biodiversity in these days, in these months, because they need to submit that before COP. So we want to call you to look for the focal points of your country that are always, that information is always included in the websites of each of your countries to participate in these meetings that are being held in Latin America and the Caribbean so that you can take urgent action. So this is a call, and I urge you to participate and have an impact in your country. Thank you so much, Edith. Thank you so much, Ramiro, for opening up, for providing us information about such long trajectory about the conventions and how indigenous youth can contribute and impact. Now we're going to have a space for questions and answers. I thank the more than 100 participants that are joining us today. I also want to thank you because in the chat box you've included all of your information, so we can invite you to the following seminar that will be held soon. And for that, we're going to leave a space for asking questions to Edith and Ramiro. Please consider the time. Therefore, the name, mention the name, the people, organization, country, and the question straight, directly. And if you're going to, I'm going to ask you to please don't take more time, just go straight to the question. Let's go to 4 persons for questions, and then we're going to go back for a second round. You can raise your hands, and we're going to name you. Do you have any question?
No veo manitos levantadas.
I don't see any hands raised.
Para consultas o
For
comentarios.
any consultation or comment, questions.
Hermana Hortensia.
Sister Hortensia,
Muchas gracias.
go ahead. Thank you.
Muy buenos días, hermanos
Good
y
day,
hermanas.
brothers and
En un día
sisters.
tan especial para los pueblos indígenas.
Today is such an special day for Indigenous people, the International Day of Indigenous People. I want to also congratulate I want to congratulate you for the presentation about such an important topic as is the traditional knowledge topic, everything that is related to it got cut off international and also an international legislation and a national legislation as well. My comment regards how could we, when it comes to traditional knowledge, how could we work in the protection of traditional knowledge? Because it has a lot to do with biodiversity. Obviously, there are community protocols, but maybe harmonization between the international standards with the national standards regarding the protection of this knowledge. So I would like to see all of these from the local national experience, you know, all of this process. I don't know what our brothers and sisters have to say. Thank you so much. Maria, it's muted.
Otra pregunta y comentario. Gracias, María Eugenia.
Thank you, Maria Eugenia. Another question or comment?
Tenemos espacios para preguntas,
We have
comentarios.
space for comments, questions.
Atrévanse por
Please dare to
hacer cualquier pregunta.
speak and ask any question. Henid, go ahead, please.
Bueno, buenos días también. Un
Good
saludo para todos
morning.
los.
Kind greetings for all of
Está
the.
apagada tu- Ahora sí.
It got cut off.
Ahora sí.
We can hear you now.
Yo quiero hacer una pregunta
I
también
want
en
to ask
relación a lo que hace la
about
hermana María, es en
what
temas
Sister
de
Maria
el
does.
monitoreo a los
This
sistemas
regards
de
the monitoring
conocimientos
on
propios que
the
muchas veces son
knowledge
inmateriales
systems,
y que incluso
knowledge
están
monitoring systems
guardados
that sometimes are even
en el idioma materno, en el idioma propio,
stored in
que no
the
pueden llevarse a
native
estadísticas como
language, in the mother
decir tantas
language, that
hectáreas de área
cannot be led to
protegida.
statistics. We cannot
Creo
say, for
que
example, all these many
hay unos
hectares of
retos en
protected
torno
areas. So I believe that there are
al
several
monitoreo de los
challenges
sistemas de
regarding the
conocimientos
monitoring of
propios.
the knowledge
¿Cómo
systems that are
se está
specific to each
pensando?
group.
Porque
How are
también
we thinking about
la
that? Because
posibilidad de
also there's
monitoreo
a
da
possibility for
posibilidades de acceso a
monitoring.
financiación. ¿Cómo
There
se
is a
está
possibility for this
pensando
to
de
give
alguna forma a los
access to
pueblos
funding. So
en
how
torno a
are people
reconocer el
thinking
aporte de los conocimientos
about acknowledging
tradicionales
the
hacia la
contribution of
biodiversidad
traditional
y cómo hacer
knowledge to and the
seguimiento
contribution
de
that that has
casos
on
en nuestros
biodiversity and the
contextos, en
monitoring of
nuestros
cases within
territorios? No sé
our
si hay
specific
algunos
contexts and
ejemplos que nos
territories? I
puedan
don't know if there are any
facilitar los
examples that you
panelistas
could
que tienen tanta
facilitate
experiencia,
the
tanto el
panelists,
señor
maybe with so
Ramiro
much
como la
experience, Mr.
compañera Edith,
Ramiro, like
en torno al
Sister Edith,
sistema de conocimientos
regarding
propios
the
aplicados en las
specific
comunidades y en la búsqueda de
knowledge
financiación para poder
systems
seguir protegiendo esos
to
conocimientos
continue
propios.
protecting
Gracias.
that
Muchas
knowledge. Thank you.
gracias, Jenny. Bueno, y
Thank
aquí
you,
hay otra
Janet.
pregunta que
We have
dice
another
de
question here
Osber, saludamos a
from
Osber.
Osper.
¿Cuántos países han
How
presentado
many
sus
countries
planes de
have
biodiversidad
presented
hasta el
their
momento?
biodiversity
Bueno, y
plans
ella
up until
quizás le puedo
now?
responder porque
Well, I might be able
hace
to
menos de un
respond
mes
that
en una
because
reunión
less than a month
donde estuvieron
ago,
todos los
I
países de
was in a
América Latina y el
meeting with
Caribe
all of the Latin
presentando sus
American and
avances
Caribbean
y
countries, and they
lamentablemente casi todos
presented
los
their
países
progress.
están
And
atrasados
unfortunately,
en lo
almost
que
all
es
of
la
the countries are
presentación de sus
behind
proyectos.
regarding
Por
the
eso
presentation
es
of their
importante en estos días, en
proposals.
estos
That
tiempos, en
is
este mes,
why
estar
right now
ellos
in this
trabajando en la
month it is important for them
participación. Es
to work on the
importante que la
participation.
participación de los
It is
pueblos
important for the
indígenas esté
participation
presente
of
y
the
puedan
indigenous people to be
participar
present there.
activamente en la
It
creación
is
de estos
important to
itinerarios.
actively participate in the creation
Otra
of such
pregunta por ahí,
strategies. Do you have any other
o
question
comentario. Bueno,
or
le
comment?
damos
Okay,
el
let's
tiempo a Edith o a Ramiro
give
si
time
se
to Edith
quieren
or
referir, por
Ramiro
favor,
if they want
a algunos
to
comentarios.
refer to the prior two comments that we just heard.
Sí, sí,
Yes,
Hortensia.
Adelante, Ramiro.
yes, Hortensia.
Sí.
Go ahead,
A la
Ramiro.
primera pregunta, gracias a la hermana por
Regarding the first question, thank you,
pregunta y comentario.
sister, for the
Es
question
muy
and comment.
importante, digamos, el tema
It is
de
very
los
important
indicadores. Yo
when
hablaba
it
de los
comes to
indicadores
the
y aquí es
indicators. You know,
importante
I
que
was talking about the
traigamos todo el
indicators,
tema de
and
los
it is important for us
conocimientos
to bring
tradicionales,
all of the traditional knowledge topic on the
particularmente de
table,
las
to the table,
mujeres indígenas.
particularly the knowledge of
Entonces,
indigenous women.
yo creo que debemos
I
de
believe
cambiar,
that we
como yo lo
must
decía,
change, as I was
nosotros ya
saying,
tenemos algunas
we
experiencias y
already
algunos
have
trabajos
some
en
experience and
cambiar
some
los
work
indicadores
done
de
on
indicadores naturales a
the natural indicators
indicadores
and
que no
going
están
from
divididos, sino que
cultural
están de la
indicators to
mano,
natural
digamos, y
indicators,
nosotros hacemos todo
which
un
are not
trabajo
divided, they're both
de
tied to each other.
fortalecimiento de
If we are
estructuras, de
working on the
sistemas de
strengthening of
conservación, de
structures and
sistemas de
conservation
agricultura,
systems and
de temas
agricultural system and
económicos
conservation
indígenas,
systems,
pues
and
estos por sí solos van a dar
that
la
they
conservación.
uh,
Yo estoy
in their
totalmente de
own
acuerdo
will provide
en que debemos de
conservation.
cambiar
I
el
totally
indicador,
agree
digamos, de
on the
medir
fact that
árboles,
we
de
need to
medir
change
hectáreas,
the
a medir
indicators for measuring
procesos.
hectares and trees to
Digamos,
measuring
nosotros tenemos hoy
processes.
por hoy una
We
propuesta
today
que
have
es el
a
plan
proposal,
de
which is
pago por
the
compensaciones indígenas.
payment for indigenous
El pago por compensaciones se está basando
payment for
en la
compensations for
medición de
indigenous, and
4
it's based
pilares,
on the
mal llamados. El
measuring
primer
of
pilar
four
es el
pillars.
tema de
The
los
first one
conocimientos
is
tradicionales. El
the
segundo
traditional
pilar es el
knowledge
tema de
pillar.
tierras
The
y
second one
territorios.
regards
El tercer
territories
pilar
and land.
es
The
el tema
third
de
pillar
el buen vivir. Ni siquiera es
covers
economía, es
good
el buen
living.
vivir, digamos, toda la
It's not
parte de
even economy, it's
generación
good living.
económica.
It refers
Y un
to
cuarto
the
pilar de
economic
derechos. Y
generation
esos,
part, and a
entonces,
fourth
porque yo
regarding
siempre digo, si tú
rights.
fortaleces la
If you
estructura
strengthen the
tradicional,
structure, the
tú
traditional
conservas el bosque,
structure,
tú
you
conservas el
are
agua.
preserving the
Si tú
forest,
conservas,
you are
digamos, si tú
preserving the
conservas
water,
sitios y lugares
and
sagrados,
you're
conservas el
preserving the
bosque,
sacred
el agua y los
places, you're
recursos.
preserving the
Si tú
forests and
respetas
the
los derechos de los hombres o
resources, and you're
mujeres
respecting
indígenas,
the
tú haces.
rights of
Entonces hay una
indigenous men and
medición,
women.
hay,
So there
digamos,
is a
hay
measurement, that
una
there is
descolonización, digamos, de los
decolonization,
indicadores. Hay
so to
todo
speak, of
una creación de
indicators. There is an
indicadores y planes.
entire
¿Cuántos
creation
planes
of
nacionales han
indicators. How
presentado?
many national
Todos los
plans have
países
been
tienen
presented? All
presentados
of the
sus planes.
countries have
Lo que tenemos que ver
presented
es
their
qué
plan. What we need
planes
to see
están
is what
actualizándose,
plans are
¿sí?
being updated.
Esto es importante.
That
Deben
is
inundarse,
important,
digamos, de que
and there is
los
another
planes deben de
um,
actualizarse
thing.
cada año, tienen
The
que
plans need to be
realizarse informes
updated
anuales.
yearly reports need to be elaborated as well, and these reports need to be there. It used to be every 2 years, but now it's open. So now we need to analyze the plans and the reports. For example, there are countries that are updating their plans. For example, Guatemala is updating their plan. Right there is a right time for the indigenous people to go to the state of Guatemala to integrate several things. Actually, they're doing that. They're integrating that. Great work has been done there in all of those spaces. So we already have one chapter. I think that we there need to see that the plans have a chapter and that they're cross-sectional. We don't say um, just one chapter has nothing to do with the other elements, but then the rest is cross-sectional. So it's important for all of you to go to the CGP website and to go to the national strategies and plans that can then turn into plans and action plans. And then you can see how the country
Muchas
is
gracias,
and
Ramiro.
how we can work. Thank you so much, Ramiro.
Edith, ¿algún comentario?
Edith, do you have anything that you would like to say?
Sí, gracias,
Yes,
querida
thank
Hortensia. En
you,
efecto,
dear
yo
Hortensia.
creo que
In
las
effect,
hermanas
I
plantean un
believe
tema
that the
fundamental
sisters
que
are
es el
proposing a fundamental topic,
conocimiento, ¿no?
which is knowledge,
Em,
right?
Uno de los hermanos
One of
decía
the
hace algunos
brothers
años, el
was saying a
conocimiento
few
es un
years ago
tema,
that knowledge
es un
is
tema muy
a
íntimo de los
very
pueblos
intimate
indígenas,
subject
que
for
infortunadamente pues
indigenous
la
peoples, and
expropiación ha llegado
unfortunately, the
hasta allá,
expropriation
hasta
has
meterse
reached
en lo más
them.
profundo de
It
nuestro ser,
has
que son los
meddled
conocimientos
into the deepest
sobre el
thing for us,
territorio,
which
sobre la
is our
diversidad,
knowledge about
sobre
territory,
nuestra
our
cultura.
biodiversity, and our
Pero
culture.
desafortunadamente, como este
Unfortunately,
tema, la
since
afectación al
there's
conocimiento, yo
the
exploré los
affectation to
territorios,
on knowledge,
no
I've
se
seen
ve, o
this in the
sea, lo
territories.
discutimos en los
This is
escenarios
something that we
internacionales,
discuss
¿no?
at
En
international
los
scenarios. We
instrumentos
discuss this
internacionales,
under
pero
the
en la
international
localidad,
instruments, but
todo lo
at a
que es la
local level,
expropiación del
everything
conocimiento
that regards
no es
the
muy
expropriation of
evidente,
knowledge is
digamos, la
not
gente
very
no la
evident
siente
or
como
visible. People
palpable.
do not feel it
A
so
veces
much, like when they
la
are
integridad del
um, when
territorio
they
o la
take their
vida, pues es una
integrity, life, or
violación no directa o
territory.
evidente.
So this is a
Pero cuando
violation
le
that is not
expropian los
so evident,
conocimientos,
but when they
la gente
expropriate the
no lo
knowledge,
siente. Por eso pues ha sido tan
people
difícil
don't
como
feel
hacer
that as
estrategias
if it was a
de
land.
defensa como
So
de
the
seguimiento,
strategies
¿no?
for
Así
following
que
up
creo
and
que uno
have
de las
not been very
herramientas
effective. I believe
importantes
that one of the
que los
important
pueblos
tools
indígenas
is for
sigamos
indigenous people to
teniendo
continue
como esas escuelas de
having like
conocimiento,
those
como
knowledge
esa cercanía
schools
con
or
los
like that
mayores, pues
closeness with
primero
the
para que el
elderly
conocimiento no se
first,
extinga,
for the
porque
knowledge not to be
como
not
ya
to
se ha
disappear,
documentado, pues
because
ese
as it
conocimiento
has been
está quedando en
documented,
los
then that
libros
knowledge
de
stays in
grandes
the books of
universidades
great
que lo
universities
están rotulando
that
como de
are
ellas, pero
classifying it
no
as their
en los
own,
territorios.
but are
Entonces,
labeling as
creo que una de
it
las
as their own,
funciones es justamente
and it
proteger
becomes no longer
y
part of the
seguir,
territory. So I think that one of the important
digamos,
tasks is to
socializando,
protect and continue
obviamente lo que es
socializing,
posible, porque no
obviously,
todos los
whatever is
conocimientos
possible,
se pueden
because not all of the
socializar con
knowledge
todas
can
las
be
personas,
socialized with
pero sí generando
everyone.
esas
But
estrategias de
yes,
cómo
generating
preservar ese
those
conocimiento.
strategies.
Y una de ellas es justamente
And
que el
one of them is
conocimiento se siga
precisely for
aplicando a los
knowledge to
territorios,
continue to
¿cierto?
be applied in
De otro lado,
territories,
pues
right?
creo
On the
que
other hand,
a
I
los
believe
pueblos y
that
organizaciones nos compete, ¿no? Mirar esas
peoples and
estrategias,
organizations
porque
must
si
be
bien
concerned
algunos
about
pueblos han
looking at those
decidido
strategies, because
sistematizar, por
even if
ejemplo, los
some peoples
conocimientos,
have decided to
otros pueblos
systematize
consideran
knowledge,
que tal vez
others
no es eso
consider
la
that
forma de
maybe that's
protección,
not a
que de
way
pronto el
of
conocimiento estaría en riesgo.
protecting and that
Pero
maybe
en
the
todo caso, pues lo
knowledge will
más
be at risk.
conveniente
But
para
in
estos
any case, the most
conocimientos es
convenient for this
aplicarlos,
knowledge, what
llevarlos
is
a la
it? To
práctica,
apply
¿no?
them, to
Seguir con
implement them,
nuestra
to practice
alimentación
them, to
propia, con nuestra
continue with our
medicina
own
propia. Y esa creo
food
que es como una
preparation,
de
with
las
our own
estrategias.
medicine.
Y
And
lo
I think
otro, pues
that's one of the
concuerdo con
strategies. And
Ramiro
then
en el
the other
sentido
thing, I
de
agree
tener
with
esos
Ramiro in the
indicadores
sense of
claros, ¿no? De
having those
hacer ese
natural
monitoreo
indicators,
con nuestros
conducting this
propios
monitoring
indicadores.
with our
Decía
own
uno de los
indicators,
compañeros, pues
as one of
que
our colleagues
obviamente
was
no todos
saying. Well,
definitivamente tenemos
indigenous,
diferentes
definitely, we all
indicadores,
have
¿no?
different
Mirar
indicators.
cómo está la luna,
We
mirar cómo
take a look
está
at
el
the
día, mirar qué ha
sun,
pasado
we
con
take
los
a look at the
árboles. Todos
date,
esos
the
son los
sun, the
indicadores
trees, all
naturales
of those are
que se
our
basan nuestro
natural
conocimiento. Y
indicators
es
that our
que es
knowledge is
importante,
based
pues,
on.
que no
But
perdamos esto y que
what's
lo sigamos
important is for us not
implementando en la práctica.
to lose that
Gracias.
and for us to continue practicing.
Gracias, Edith.
Thank you, Edith.
¿Alguna otra pregunta, comentario?
Do you have any other
Tenemos
question or
hermanos y
comment?
hermanas de
We
diferentes
have brothers and
latitudes,
sisters from
no solamente
different
de América Latina y el
latitudes, not
Caribe,
only
sino
from
de
Latin
otras
America
partes
and
del
the
mundo
Caribbean,
también.
but also
Le
from other parts of
le
the world.
abrazamos hoy
So we
día
really
justamente en el Día
send you a
Internacional de
hug,
los Pueblos
especially today in the
Indígenas.
International Day for Indigenous
Prosperina,
people.
adelante.
'Prosperina, go ahead.
La compañera que está
Sí,
levantando la mano,
sí,
adelante.
Our colleague that's raising her hand,
Mari
please go
Mari,
ahead.
Muen, un saludo grande para
Kind
cada uno y
greetings for each and
de
all
los
of
que hoy
you.
día nos encontramos aquí en esta
And
plataforma. Desde Chile,
from
un
Chile,
abrazo cariñoso
I want
en
to
este día tan
send
importante
you all
que se me
warm
estaba pasando. Sí.
greetings on this
Recordé
important day
ahora
that
en
I
la
was
mañana
forgetting. I
cuando
just
entré
remembered it in the
a la
morning when I
plataforma y
entered into
ustedes
the
dan este
platform
saludo
and when you were
grande.
giving this great greeting.
Nos debemos a
We
nosotros, a
owe
nuestra
ourselves,
gente, a los que hicieron camino
we owe
primero, ¿cierto?
ourselves
Y
to our
desde
people,
ese
the ones
punto de
that paved
vista
the
quiero
path
saludar de
before.
manera
And
hoy día
from that
especial a
perspective,
aquellos
I want to
hermanos y hermanas
especially
como
commemorate those
Ramiro,
brothers and sisters
Estela,
such
bueno,
as Ramiro,
Hortensia,
you,
también y a Ruth
Hortensia,
que nos
and Ruth, who
han
have
entregado conocimiento,
given
¿cierto? Nos han
knowledge. They have
información.
delivered information, knowledge,
Y desde los
and
territorios a seguir
from
trabajando solamente,
territories
no tengo preguntas, sino que
just
a
need to
seguir
keep working.
trabajando,
I don't
¿cierto?
have a
Instar
question. I just
esta
want to
tarea
say
que
that we need
tenemos
to keep
como
working
mujeres
and that we have this task as
como parte
women, as
también
part
de la
also
casa, como
of
parte de
the
la
house,
comunidad,
as part of the
como parte de la
community, as
universidad
part of
también,
the
porque ahí es donde
university
estoy
as well,
trabajando
because that's where I'm
últimamente.
working lately.
Y es verdad lo que
And it is
decía la
true
Ruth
what
ahí con los
Ruth was
conocimientos y los
saying
saberes.
with
Y hoy
knowledge and
día a
the
instar a
wisdom
que lo
that today
sigamos
we have. We need
retomando.
to urge to
Creo
its
que
practice,
hay
to the practice of such knowledge,
también
to the
ha
implementation of
habido
such
un
knowledge. I
avance en
also
el
believe there
sentido de
has
que
been
hoy
progress
día
in
más
the sense
estamos
that today we are
recuperando
recovering
nuestro idioma,
more and
nuestras
more of
lenguas
our language,
ancestrales.
our
Entonces, en ese sentido
ancestral
también esto
dialects. So in
es
that sense,
importante
I
para
do
nosotras.
believe it is also important for
Y
us.
eso
And
solamente quería
that's all I
saludarlo a
wanted to
ustedes
say. I
y
only wanted to
agradecer por
greet
esta
you and thank
instancia
you for this
que me
instance and for
permitieron
this opportunity
invitarme, ¿cierto?
to
Porque
be
como hice un
here
diplomado
because, as
anteriormente, entonces estoy
the
atenta
panelists said
a seguir
previously, I
trabajando.
am
Mañón, futa
just
mañón,
looking forward to keep
ramuen
working
a cada uno de ustedes.
to each of you.
Chukulaime, Aimi, Achantu, mañón.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias por
Thank you
sus
so
palabras.
much
Bueno,
for your
vamos a tener
words.
también la
Now,
oportunidad
we
de
are also going to
darle
have the
un
opportunity to
tiempo
give some
a
time
Luisa
to
Castañeda. Ella es
Luisa
directora
Castañeda.
adjunta de
She's
Land is
the
Life, para que
Assistant
pueda
Director of
tener
Land
la
is Life, so
palabra.
that she can
Por
have the
favor,
floor.
adelante. Y luego
Please go
seguimos con las
ahead,
demás
and then we're
preguntas.
going to continue with the rest of the questions.
Gracias, Hortensia,
Thank you,
por darme la
Hortensia,
palabra y
for giving me the
muchas
floor.
gracias a todos ustedes. Feliz
And
Día
thank you to all of you.
Internacional de los Pueblos Indígenas del
Happy
Mundo.
Indigenous
Estábamos ahora en
People
el
International
evento
Day.
que estaba
We
realizando el
are
Foro
just, we was
Permanente sobre
just at an
Cuestiones
event
Indígenas de las Naciones Unidas. Y yo
from
solo
the
quiero hacer un
Permanent
paréntesis
Forum
acá,
for
que
Indigenous
obviamente esto está
people
muy
from the United
relacionado con el
Nations.
tema que
I just
estamos
wanted to
hablando y
appear
es el
here because
enfoque
this
que
is
se
very
ha dado
related to the topic
este
we
día
were
de hoy a los
discussing,
pueblos indígenas en
and
el
it's
ámbito
the day that
voluntario
has
y con impacto inicial. Y esta ha sido la
this
primera
has
ocasión
been the
en que las
first
Naciones Unidas le
occasion
ha
in
dado un
which the
enfoque muy
United
especial a estos
Nations
pueblos que
especially focuses on these
de manera
non-contacted and
voluntaria han
isolated,
decidido estar
voluntarily
lejos
isolated
y no
people.
tener no contacto con
Um,
la sociedad mayoritaria y por ende pues han generado,
so they
han
have generated,
contribuido a la
they have
protección de estos
contributed to the
ecosistemas tan
protection
importantes
of such
para la
important
diversidad de lo
ecosystems
que
for
estamos hablando hoy acá.
biodiversity, which
De
is
parte
exactly
de
what we're
Lanisla, nosotros
talking about
estamos
today.
muy
So on behalf
complacidos
of
que
Land is
podamos
Life, we
hacer
are very
estos
happy
eventos y estas
to be
sesiones
able
de
to
diálogo,
organize
las
these
5
events
sesiones
and
que vamos
dialogue
a
sessions
tener
and the 5 other
en
sessions that we're going to
conjunto
hold all
con la Red
together
de Mujeres por la
with the
Diversidad, de Mujeres Indígenas por la Diversidad
Indigenous
de
Women Network
Latinoamérica
for that
y también
biodiversity in Latin
con FIIB.
America, and
Para
also with FIIB.
nosotros es importante y como lo hemos resaltado a
For
lo largo
us,
de
it is
nuestros
important,
32
as we
años de
said,
trabajo para
along these
avanzar
32 years of
en los
work, in
derechos de
order
los
to
pueblos
progress
indígenas, es
in
necesario
terms of the rights of
asegurar
Indigenous people,
que
it is
los derechos
necessary
territoriales,
to
el acceso al
ensure that
territorio, a las
territorial
tierras, a los recursos
rights, the access
naturales
to
y también
territory
como la
sources
libre
and natural
determinación sean
resources and how free
garantizadas. Por esto,
determination are
estos eventos son
guaranteed and
muy
ensured.
importantes.
Therefore,
Estaba
these events are
escuchando
very important. And
a
I was
Ramiro
listening
y
to
a Edith
Ramiro and
contando
Edith.
estos
They told
antecedentes
us
y
about
estos
the
contextos que son
background
tan
and the
claves porque nos van a
context that are so
permitir
key
construir el
because they
camino
will
para las
allow us to
próximas
build a path
sesiones
for the
de
following
trabajo que
sessions
seguramente van
that
a fortalecer
I'm
las
sure will
capacidades y
strengthen
nuestros
the capacities
conocimientos
and
para
our
llegar
knowledge so
mucho
that
más
we can
preparados en la be much more prepared for COP16 in Cali. There are many people that want to attend, but what's important is to attend and create a lot of impact and to go prepared with an agenda, with an important agenda, with the knowledge as Indigenous people so that we can make progress in the most important topics, the resource mobilization, the implementation of the Montreal Framework, and the other topics that will be discussed. So I wanted to welcome you. Well, we're about to close this conversation, but I want to thank you to all of the more than 100 people that have connected during this entire 1 hour and a half of work. Thank you so much. Hortensia, I
Gracias,
give you the floor.
Luisa. Gracias,
Thank you,
Landeslife
Luisa.
por
Thank
un
you,
gran
Landeslife, which is a great
aliado.
ally.
Muchísimos
During
años ha
many
trabajado de
years,
la mano
they
de la
have
Red de
worked
Mujeres
together with
Indígenas
the
sobre
Indigenous
biodiversidad
Women
en el Caribe y
Network
el
for
Caribe y
biodiversity
otros
in Latin
pueblos
America and the
indígenas
Caribbean and
también.
other Indigenous
Muchísimas
peoples in
gracias,
the world
Luisa.
as well. Thank you so much,
Carmen, por favor, te damos la
Luisa.
palabra.
Carmen, please, go ahead.
Sí,
Yes.
buenos días con
Day.
todos. Primeramente quisiera
First,
presentarme.
I
Mi
would like
nombre
to
es
introduce
Carmen
myself.
Chalán.
I'm Carmen Chalan.
Mi país es Ecuador.
My country is
Pertenezco
Ecuador.
al pueblo
I belong to
indígena
the indigenous people,
Chibuleo.
Chibuleo.
Y quisiera
And
agradecer
I would
por la
like to thank
invitación
you
y
for the
por la
invitation and for
organización
the
de este taller
organization of this workshop
que nos han hecho
that
llegar en beneficio de los
has
pueblos
been sent to
indígenas.
us for the benefit of
Y
indigenous
ojalá
peoples.
que este
And
taller no
hopefully
sea la
this
primera ni
workshop
la última,
won't
sino
be
que
the
igual nos
first
sigan
nor the last
invitando
one.
para
Hopefully
nosotros como
we'll
indígenas y
continue to receive
mujeres
invitations so that us as
capacitar más
indigenous
en el
persons and
empoderamiento de las
women
mujeres.
can train more, can
Nada más,
instruct
muchísimas
more
gracias.
our
Y luego
women
quisiera hacer
about
una
empowerment.
pregunta
Thank you so much.
sobre
And then I would like
la
to ask a question
propuesta. La
about the
propuesta que,
proposal.
bueno,
The
que nos puedan
proposal
sugerir
that, well,
algunas
I would like you
propuestas
to
para
suggest
la
some
participación
proposals
indígena
to us
dentro
for
de
the
los
indigenous
pueblos y
participation within
comunidades
the
indígenas.
communities and indigenous
Eso sería
communities
mi
and peoples.
pregunta.
That would be my
Muchas
question.
gracias, Carmen.
Thank you,
Betsy,
Carmen. Betsy,
adelante.
go ahead, please.
Hola, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, te
Hi, can
escuchamos.
you hear
Adelante.
me? Yes, we can hear you.
Bueno, un saludo desde acá de
I
Colombia, de la
greet you
organización
from
indígena,
Colombia,
de
from
la
the
organización
indigenous
indígena Cancuama de la
organization
Sierra Nevada de
Cancuama
Santa Marta.
from Santa Marta.
Primera vez que estoy en este
This is the
taller.
first time I attend one of these
Bueno, quería
workshops.
saber cuál de los
I wanted
pueblos
to know
indígenas
which
del
of the indigenous
Caribe
people from
están
the
en este espacio,
Caribbean are also in this space.
porque gracias por la invitación de una
Thank you so much for
compañera
the
que me hizo
invitation.
llegar
Thank you to one of my
el
colleagues that
enlace
sent
para
me
que
the link
participara
so that I
y
could
también
participate
colocar el conocimiento
and
de las
so
mujeres
that I can
indígenas de la Sierra
also
Nevada de Santa Marta. Gracias.
and also
Muchas gracias.
to
Bueno, si
the
no hay más
indigenous women of Santa
manos
Marta.
levantadas,
Thank you so much. If we do
vamos
not
a
have
darle
more
la
hands
última
raised, we're
palabra
gonna
para también se vaya
um,
despidiendo Edith y Ramiro para luego yo
allow
darles algunas
Edith
informaciones
and Ramiro
y
to say
nuestra
closing
coordinadora
remarks,
regional
and
también
then our
pueda
regional
hablar.
coordinator is going to
Edith
do so as well.
y Ramiro.
Edith and Ramiro.
Pues antes de dar mis
Yes,
palabras de
before
despedida, pues
my
querida
closing
Carmen, a
remarks,
forma de
dear
participar,
Carmen,
las
the way of
propuestas, pues
participating, well, is
especialmente
with
ahorita
the
en
proposals,
los
especially
planes de
right now
acción que se
in
están
the action
actualizando en
plans that
cada
are being
país.
updated
El
in each of
gobierno
the
del Ecuador
countries.
pues ha sido
The
muy activo
Ecuadorian
en este
government has been
tema,
very
también
active
ha sido
about
muy
this regard
sensible, no muy
and
cercano
also very
al Foro
close and
Internacional
sensitive
Indígena de
to the
Biodiversidad.
International
Entonces creemos que es
Indigenous
fácil pues hacer parte y
Biodiversity
mirar
Forum. So
y
I believe it is
asegurarnos de
easy
que
to
la
get close
participación
and
de los
look
pueblos
and
es
make
en
sure
esa
that the
estrategia
participation
de
of
que
the
las
peoples
mujeres
are
indígenas
included in that
estemos
strategy, that
contempladas en esta
indigenous women
estrategia,
are
que
contemplated
nuestro
in that
derecho a las
strategy,
tierras y territorios
that
esté.
our right to lands and territory
Para nuestra
is
hermana
included. For
del
our
norte de Colombia,
sister
pues
from
en
the north of
efecto,
Colombia, in
de este
effect,
espacio han venido hermanas arhuacas, hermanas
sisters
cancuamas,
from
hermanas guayú,
Wayun
diferentes pueblos del
and
Caribe también y
Oraka,
hermanos
sisters have
también,
come
¿no?
from
Como ha
different
dicho
and
Ramiro,
brothers
pues
as
es
well
un
from different
espacio
places
que
in the
está
Caribbean. And
abierto,
as
¿no? Para
Ramiro
que
said,
todas y
this is a
todos
space that is
participar.
open for
Y
everyone
con
to
esto, pues mil
participate. And with
gracias por
that,
esta
I just want to
oportunidad
thank you
y
for
pues
this
estamos
opportunity,
abiertos
and
a
we
cualquier
remain at your
pregunta, cualquier
disposal
otro
for
espacio.
any
Muchas
question
gracias.
or
any other space. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Edith. Ramiro?
Gracias a Hortensia,
Thank you,
muy amable,
Hortensia.
muy
Thank
buena
you. You've been very
facilitación
kind.
con el tiempo
It's
ahí
been a
que
great
nos mantiene siempre
facilitation.
al
The
orden.
time
Gracias a
keeps
la
us
red de
always
mujeres por la
organized.
invitación,
Thank
realmente
you
es
to
muy
the
importante que
network of
puedan
women
ir
for the
desarrollando
invitation. It
estos
is very
procesos de
important for this
diálogo, estos
process, this
procesos
dialogue processes to
de
be
trabajo, porque
developed,
permiten de alguna
this
otra manera
working process,
informar
because they
y
allow
hacer llegar la información
to
a muchas más hermanas.
make the
Digamos que eso es lo
information
importante porque mientras más
get
tengamos
to
más
more brothers
voces,
and
nuestras
sisters. So the
propuestas
more
van a ser
voices
mucho
we
mejor y
have,
van a estar
then our proposals will
fortalecidas
be
y
much better,
respaldadas.
will be
Así que un
strengthened
saludo,
and
ahora
supported
no
and
de tierras
endorsed.
mayas,
So
ahora de tierras
I'm
brunjas
not
acá
in
en
Mayan
Costa
lands, I'm
Rica,
in
pero es
Broken
un
lands
gusto
here in Costa
saludarles.
Rica, but
Gracias
it
y
is a great
bienvenida a cada
pleasure
una de
to
ustedes.
greet you all and
Muchas
have a great
gracias,
day.
querido Ramiro.
Thank you
Y
so
bueno,
much, dear
envíale
Ramiro.
también de nuestra
And
parte
also
a toda esa
from our
gente de ese
side,
territorio tan
please send
bello.
our kind greetings to all
Aquí
of the people
estamos
from
también
that
para comunicar.
territory
Bueno,
as well.
aprovechar de
I just want
informarles
to
también
take this
que,
opportunity to
como les
also
dije al
inform
comienzo,
you
este
that,
es
as I said in the
un
beginning,
seminario en
this
línea
is
de
an
varios que
online
estamos
seminar
realizando
of
y para
several
que tomen
ones that we are
fecha y
organizing, and so
consideren
that
la
you can save the
participación
dates
en
and
los
so that you can
próximos.
consider
Les voy
participating
a
in the
nombrar que el
next
próximo día
uh,
viernes
seminars. The
tenemos
next is on
un próximo
next
seminario en
Friday.
línea
We have another
que es
online seminar
capacitación de la estructura de la
for
COP en el
the
CBD y cómo
structure
participar como
training
jóvenes
for
indígenas.
COP, or the
Aquí les hago un llamado también para que
creation of
pasen la
skills
voz
for
a
COP,
otros jóvenes
and I'm
indígenas para
going
que puedan
to
participar y
send you the
tomar este
invitation so that you can send it
conocimiento.
forward to other people so
Y
that they can also
luego el
participate,
jueves
other
5
indigenous
del
people.
9
And then
también
on
tenemos
Thursday
otro
from the
con los
5th to the
aportes del
9th, we
factor de las
also have
mujeres
another one with the
indígenas en la
contribution
implementación
from
del plan de
the
acción
indigenous women about
de
the
género
implementation of
sobre
the action
biodiversidad.
plan
Esto es sumamente
on gender and
importante
biodiversity.
porque el
This is
plan de
extremely
género debe
important
ser
because the gender plan
transversal en todos
has
los
to be
aspectos que
cross-sectional in
estamos
all of the
desarrollando hoy
aspects that
día
we are
y
developing
también lo están
today.
considerando para que sea en
And
forma
that's
transversal
also
en
been
las metas y
considered
estrategias
to
de estos
be
planes de biodiversidad
cross-sectional
hoy
in
día
all of
y
the
ojalá ustedes
biodiversity
puedan incidir en
strategies and
esos
plans
planes.
today. And hopefully you
Luego
can have an
tenemos el
impact on
jueves
such
19,
plans. Then
vamos a
Thursday the
hablar sobre
19th, we're going
un
to talk
aspecto
about
importante que
a
nos
very important
nombró Ramiro y
aspect
que varios
named by
compañeros, hermanos y hermanas
Ramiro, and
están
several
tratando,
brothers and sisters
que es la
are
información
trying to
digital
are
de la
working on that, which
secuencia y
regards
pueblos
the
indígenas.
digital
Y
information, the
el viernes
sequencing, the digital
4
sequences,
del 10
sequencing.
tenemos los
And from the 4th
alcances
to
de
the
los pueblos
10th, we're going to talk
indígenas y la
about the scope of
movilización de
indigenous people and
recursos.
the
Para que estén
mobilization of
atentos,
resources.
yo
So
les estoy dejando
please
ahora
stay looking out.
en el chat les estoy dejando la
I'm
información de nuestras redes sociales, de nuestra
I'll leave
página, aunque no está
the
muy
information about our
actualizada, pero podrán
social
encontrar
media and our
fácilmente
website, even
información
if it's not
del
very
correo
updated, but
electrónico
soon you'll be able to find more
de la
information. And
REMIC
I'm
también.
also going to leave you the
También, si
email
ustedes
of
necesitan,
the
tenemos
network.
el correo
If you
electrónico de los
then
puntos
need the
focales
email of the
de
focal
su país
points
para que
of
los
your
puedan invitar y
countries so that you can
participar de la
invite them,
creación de
so that they
estos
can
nuevos
participate in the
planes
creation of
y,
these new
planes y
plans
programas de
and
biodiversidad,
programs for
también se los podemos
biodiversity,
entregar.
please, we can also
Florina,
send
si te
that to
encuentras
you.
por ahí, yo quiero
Florina,
agradecerles
if you're around,
a
I would
todos,
like
a
to
todas por
thank
estar
you,
participando.
each and
Y
all of
antes
you,
de
for your
terminar, le vamos a dar la
participation. And
palabra a
before
Florina, que es
ending,
la coordinadora
I will give
regional de la
the
Red de
floor
Mujeres
to Florina, which is
Indígenas
the
sobre
regional coordinator of
biodiversidad.
the
Por favor,
regional
adelante, Florina.
network of the network of indigenous
Bueno, muchísimas
women
gracias,
for
sobre
biodiversity. Go ahead.
todo a todas
Thank you so
las
much,
personas que
especially to
pudieron
each and all of the
ingresar, más de
persons who
100
were able
personas,
to enter, more
y
than
también
100
en especial
persons,
a
and
los
also
presentadores, al
to the
doctor Edith,
panelists, especially to
al
the
doctor
panelists,
Ramiro
Dr. Edith,
Batzin,
Dr.
y
Ramiro Batzin.
agradecer por
I want to
estas
thank
reflexiones y compartir estas
you for the
experiencias
thoughts, reflections, and
que a
for
través de
sharing
muchos
experiences
años se ha venido
that
generando,
during many
inclusive por
years
un
has been
pantallazo así como
generated, and
de
that
un
they
pincelazo,
are
como decimos,
they're
porque
an important input,
desarrollarlo
they're an
cada
important
año,
stroke of
cada
this,
actividad,
because
cada
developing every
negociación,
year,
cada
every
COP, pues
activity,
nos
every
llevaría quizás un
negotiation,
año,
every
¿verdad?
COP, then will take us like a
Entonces yo
year.
creo que
So
estos son
I think
espacios
that
tan
these are
importantes que
such
debemos
spaces that
aprovechar
are so
para ir
important that we need to
conociendo
take
de
advantage
poco a
of,
poco
to get to
todo el
know little by
proceso que se
little
ha
the
venido
entire
dando dentro
process
del
that
camino de la
has been
diversidad biológica
conducted
y en
within
el
the
marco de
biological
este día
diversity
que para
framework, and
nosotras ha
especially on
sido
this day
como,
that for
como el
us
anillo
has
al
been
dedo, como quien
like,
se dice, de
it's
hablar de
fit very
derechos,
well
hablar de cómo es
if it's very well, because we're talking about progress and rights and challenges, and to continue impacting these decision-making spaces for public policies nationally. And also, this is also for us to work with allies, as with Linus Life in this case, and many other institutions like FIIB or ICC, and many others that I can't remember right now.
justamente muy claves todo
very
ese apoyo
key
que hemos venido
uh,
haciendo y sobre
because
todo
of the
también
support. And
llamar
especially,
justamente a esta
I
reflexión
wanna
de cómo
urge
poder
you to
seguir
reflect about how
cuando
can we
hablamos de
continue
este
when we
espacio
talk about this
intergeneracional que se puede ir
intergenerational
creando,
space
porque es
that can be
importante
created,
reconocer las
because it is
sabidurías, las
important to acknowledge
experiencias
the
y
wisdom,
poder
the
compartirlos
experience,
con la gente, como lo decía
to share that
Ramiro,
with the
con la
people,
gente
as
nueva,
Ramiro
que
was
no
saying,
estemos
with the
pensando
new
para el
people,
futuro, sino que
that
sean hoy justamente
we should not
los,
think
los que
about the
están
future.
adquiriendo
We
estos
have to think that
conocimientos para poder seguir
today
proyectando justamente
it
esos
is important
derechos
for the youth
y
to
esos
acquire the
reconocimientos que
knowledge so
como
that they
pueblos
can
indígenas
continue projecting
estamos
the
haciendo, ¿no?
recognition and
Y que han
rights
sido
that as
avances que también hay
indigenous
que
people
recordar a los
we are
que nos
working on. And this is a
antecedían, por lo menos
progress
están
we need to
físicamente y
commemorate.
están en un plano
The
espiritual,
people who
pero
are
que nos
not physically here,
acompañan
they
desde
are
ese
in
plano
a
espiritual
spiritual plane,
todo
but
este
they are
trabajo.
joining us
Está el
in all of this
compromiso
work.
próximo, que es la COP16,
We have the
por la
next
cual nosotras,
commitment,
desde la Red de Mujeres,
COP16,
también estamos
us
buscando
from
cómo
the
poder
network of
llevar mucho más
Indigenous
gente,
women, we are
mucho más
finding
mujeres
ways to
en este
get a
proceso,
lot
pero
more
sin
people
embargo, como
included
mujeres
in this process.
enfrentamos pues los
But
procesos o
however,
los
as I've said
obstáculos
before,
o los
the
recursos son
processes, the
siempre casi los
challenges, the
recursos financieros.
obstacles
Sin
are
embargo,
almost always
estos espacios
financial resources.
sí le llamo la
So,
atención a
however,
esto,
these
seguir
spaces
aprovechándolos,
are
sesiones
very useful
virtuales que nos
to
dan esa oportunidad de poder
have an
ir
opportunity
conociendo las
to
informaciones
get
que
to
muchas
know the
veces
different information
demandamos,
that many
que no se
times
baja
we
la
need,
información a las comunidades.
and the
También
information is
sabemos que
not
es un reto
taken to the
que dentro de
communities
las comunidades es difícil el
and so
acceso al
we know that it is
Internet,
a challenge,
pero
and we
sin
also know that
embargo,
internet
lo que
access
los
is
que
also
están escuchando,
complicated in
los que
some of
van
the
adquiriendo
communities.
esta
However, it
información
is
también lo
important that
vayan
those who are
compartiendo
listening and acquiring this
desde sus
information to
propios
then share
sistemas
this
propios
from your own
de las
systems,
organizaciones, de los
within the
pueblos y
organizations, within
sobre
the
todo
indigenous
también
peoples, and
seguir
especially
creando este
to
trabajo en común.
create
Por eso
this
los
common
insumos que
work,
se dan a nivel
because these are the
internacional,
inputs
saber
that are
del día
given
a día de las
internationally.
comunidades, de
We
los
need to
pueblos
know about the day
indígenas, de
by
los
day of the
territorios
indigenous
en
peoples, the
los cuales
indigenous
estamos
communities and
trabajando,
territories where we're
conviviendo.
working or living in.
Y otra cosa que sí estamos
And
también
another
organizando,
thing
buscando
that we are
recursos
organizing
justamente,
and finding
es
resources for
crear
is
un
precisely
espacio de
the creation
diálogo
of a
nosotras las
dialogue
mujeres
space
indígenas
as
y estamos proyectando
indigenous
hacerlo a finales de
women, and
septiembre en
we are
Panamá,
planning to
pero
do
estamos
this
buscando
by the end of
recursos por
September in
si
Panama. But we're
piensan
trying
que
to
no
find
vamos a poder
resources just
invitar a
in case
todas
you
y a
think
todos los que
we're not going to be
quisiéramos,
able to invite
todo va a
everyone who
depender
would
de
like to
cuántos
invite, but
recursos
everything is
tengamos
going
a
to
mano.
depend on the
Sin embargo,
resources
ya
that we
se
have at
está
hand.
esperando con el
However, we're
acompañamiento de
already
Landis Live y
planning
con otras
to have
instituciones,
the
con el fondo que tenemos con
support of
FIMI,
London's
pero
Life and
sin
other
embargo,
institutions and the
nunca
FIMI
es,
fund that we have as well.
nunca es
However,
adecuado
it's
los
never
fondos.
appropriate.
Entonces tratamos de
The
hacerlo
funds are never
quizás a
enough.
finales de
So we try
septiembre
to
pues
do this, and
tengamos una
maybe by the end of
declaratoria como
September, we
red de
will have a
mujeres, como
declaration
mujeres
as a
indígenas de
network
la
of
región.
indigenous women
Quisiéramos
in the
invitar a
region,
otras
and we
regiones, pero
would like to invite
lamentablemente,
all
como
the
le
regions.
digo,
But
todo depende
unfortunately,
de
as
los
I've said,
recursos.
everything
Y
depends
estamos
on the
en esa
financial
proyección.
resources. So we are
Así
working on this
que
projection
igual
and
reitero la
planification, and
invitación
I
para los otros
reiterate the invitation
seminarios,
for the other
talleres
seminars,
virtuales que se van a
workshops
desarrollar.
online that are going
Y
to be
bueno, aquí los
conducted.
dejo y muchas
And I'm going to
gracias
leave
por todo
you
este
right
tiempo que se
now.
han
And thank
dado.
you so much
Muchas
for all this
gracias,
time that you
Hortensia,
have
por esta
taken from your day
conducción. Muchas
for this. Thank you,
gracias,
Hortensia, for
Edith,
your moderation. Thank you,
Ramiro
Edith.
y
Thank you,
al
Ramiro,
equipo que está
and
detrás
the entire team
de este trabajo.
behind
Muchas
this
gracias.
work.
Muchísimas
Thank
gracias,
you
querida
so much.
Florina, por
Thank you
todo
so
tu
much,
accionar
Florina, for all
para
of your
coordinar la red
actions,
de
for all
mujeres
of your
indígenas sobre
coordination,
biodiversidad
for the
latinoamericana y
network
caribeña.
on
Les voy a pedir que por
biodiversity in
favor
Latin
abran sus
America
cámaras para tomar
and the
una
Caribbean.
fotografía y dejar en
I
memoria
want to ask you
todas
to
estas
turn on
participantes que estuvieron.
your
Nuevamente
cameras to
agradecer la
take a
participación de
photograph, a
cada una de
screenshot,
ustedes, de
and
cada
keep
uno
a
de
memory
ustedes.
of this day and
Y
the
ahí les dejé yo las redes
participations of each
sociales,
and
la
all of
página,
you.
el
I've left
correo,
all of the
consulta,
necessary
pregunta
information
y para que puedan
for any
participar el
question,
próximo
comment,
viernes
consultation, and
en
also for
el
you to be
otro
able to
seminario en
participate
línea que
next
tendremos para ir
Friday
actualizando
in
toda
the
la
other
información
online
antes de
seminar
después.
that will be
Por favor,
holding
si vamos.
in
Mi
preparation for
cámara no funciona,
COP
disculpe, no
16. My
funciona, no
camera is
puedo
not
abrir.
working. I'm
Pero las que
sorry. I'm not
puedan,
able to turn it
por
off.
favor,
Okay.
vayan
Those of you who
prendiendo.
are able to, please
Estamos
turn them
viendo que
on.
están prendiendo de a
We're seeing
poco.
that you are progressing progressively turning your cameras on. Let's go ahead and take the first screenshots. Please, some of you who have not turned your cameras on yet, could you please go ahead and turn your cameras on? Hello. Hello. It is so nice to see you. Hello from Colombia. Please allow us to see all of you, please. We're waiting for you in Colombia. We're gonna get there, doctor.
Muchísimas gracias.
Well, thank you very
Cerramos
much.
este espacio. Les
Let's just
esperamos el
close the
próximo
space,
viernes
and we
en el
will
mismo
be waiting
canal,
for you
un
next
sábado
Friday,
de
the same
colaboración para
channel at the
aquí, el
same time.
Creador, la
Thank you
Madre
so
Tierra,
much.
todos les bendiga
And
desde aquí.
um, I wish
Gracias.
you